So when you're ready to do a ROI Calculator report, you'll need to come to this web address above, and you also will have your own unique ID for login. So you'll have a username, password, and an ID code as such. Once you've got all those details in there, you can go to login. Should take you through the calculator. Here we are. We'll click on there. Before you fill out the calculator, it's important that you've read the executive summary document and also the how to fill out the ROI calculator, so that when you come here, you've got all the information you're going to need to input to get to the report. So the first thing that we would do is we would put a company name on here. So we're going to use the ABS company today. We would also allocate a state or region that it comes from. This is really important to get the right productivity loss index. We would also nominate the industry. If your industry isn't here, just pick one that you think is similar in terms of the types of jobs that people do. So we might go for healthcare today. And occupation will stay as general. You don't need to input there. You will put the number of employees at this organisation. So we'll have 1,000 employees at this organisation. And what we would have asked the organisation for is their average annual salary. And we input that information here. So for this organisation, it was $80,000 annually. If you don't know what the average annual compensation is, you can go with the default settings, which is $80,000 a year. What happens and why it's so important to get the compensation region and sector correct is that those three values come together to create a daily productivity loss. So if you are unsure, make sure you got those factors as close as possible to correct. This is a default setting, working days per year for the Australian population. So we'll continue from there. What we have up here then is the different areas that we can look at nominating where savings come from. So we can ask the organisation, what is the average cost of an accident for yourselves? Obviously for major manufacturing type environments, it might be very expensive. For an office environment, it might be slightly lower. If you have that information, feel free to put it in there. Otherwise, just leave it at zero. The replacement cost should equal your average annual compensation, so we'll change that to $80,000. If you know the relocation cost, you would add it in here as well. This is relevant obviously for some organisations and not for others. If you're unsure, keep it at zero. We also can input the retraining cost. Again, if you're unsure, keep it at zero. But if you're dealing with a call centre environment and they tell you for every day that we have someone off sick or every week we have someone off sick, it generally costs us about $500 to train someone new. You could put $500 in there. If the organisation also uses claims or actually pays for people when they're off sick, you could put an average claim cost in here as well. That's less relevant for the Australian population, but there are some self-insured organisations where that could be a factor. We have a premium increase, which we leave zeroed out at the moment, unless your organisation is actually paying for medical treatment of health issues. And we have here as well zeroed out the provider treatment cost. And this is if an organisation would like to show their employees how much money they have saved them by having a program in place. And we have some defaults down here. You can see the default is $1,286, which is the average cost if someone has an EAP related issue for them to go and seek private support. So we can put that in there and see what it comes out to. Because we've zeroed out these areas up here, accident, relocation, retraining and so on, the percentages actually become irrelevant. However, if we did have a cost up here, let's say it cost $1,000 for every accident we had, we also know that only 10% of accidents are actually caused by things that EAP could be helpful for. So what that would do is take 10% of that $1,000 for each of those incidents. And similarly across here as well. So with retraining, we don't retrain someone every time someone's off work sick, but maybe 50% of the time we do. You can play around there with these figures, but generally we leave them as the defaults. The prevalence is a default as well. It's set at 26% at the moment, and this is based on research that we've done in Australia to look at the number of people who have an EAP related issue at any point in time. It looks at mental health, finance and legal. All information around this is in the exec summary for you. The premium inflation cost, we don't need to touch that, but that is just CPI stats around our cost of inflation. The discount rate we leave at 6% unless we look at a default change, and that is the opportunity cost of money. So if you were going to go invest your program cost for having this EAP service into some treasury bonds, you would get a 6% return on that. So we use that figure to discount off the total number. The presenteeism and absenteeism rates are set in here as defaults. They come from our converged data. And at the moment, we know that 26.4% is the average presenteeism rate for people entering into EAP. And on average, people are taking 2.4 days absent by the time they get to our service. We leave these as defaults as well. Replacement cost factor is at 1-to-1, and number of days an episode. We're saying that on average, 90 days is what we're looking at in terms of someone seeking support and getting some resolution with their issue. We'll go to continue there. So here we have our program name. We would call this one ABS overall. There we go, or just ABS, whatever you prefer. We also have to input some data in here. This is the per employee per year cost for having a program in place. So if you have a look at the annual cost of their EAP service, making sure it's just EAP, not critical incident, not training, not mediation, not any additional services, and divide that by the number of employees, you would come out with a per employee per year cost. So let's say it's $23 for this organisation. We also know that the organisation's utilisation rate is about 4%. So you would get that from the EAP reports. The program turnover rate is a default setting. What that means is that when people come in to use our service, we know that 10% of people just drop out with no reason specifically, but they don't go through with the completion of the program. The effectiveness and reduction rates we do not change. These are all default settings, and these relate to how effective EAP is at resolving people's absenteeism and presenteeism issues. And there's a number of explanations there for you to review. If you come down to OK, this will take us through to the financial metrics. When it comes to the filters, this gives us a chance to filter off exactly which group and program we're looking at. So ABS and ABS overall, and click OK. And what we're presented with is our EAP summary report. So all our input data is up the top here, and you'll see the daily productivity loss has been calculated based on our region, industry, and monthly compensation, which has come from the annual compensation. So on average, if somebody is unwell and not at work, at ABS, it's costing the organisation $462 per day that they are not at work. We have our default settings all here as well. We also know that our average provider cost is 1,286. That's just an extra added one. You'll see where we have a look at that in a moment. Here's all the assumptions which we didn't touch around utilisation rate, program cost per employee. And we also have our effectiveness rate, which at the moment is 86%. So for every 100 people that come to use our service, 86 of them will actually get an impact from what we've done to a resolution that they were looking for. The program results are then displayed down here. What it says here is that there were potentially 260 people who could have come through our program based on the 26% prevalence rate. In fact, EAP addressed 34 cases. So that would be our utilisation rate minus our program turnover rate. So there would be slightly more cases than that, but we've taken 10% off because they're people who just would have dropped out of the program. The post-program shows us that there's actually 226 people who could have used our service to get a benefit, but still are out there. So that's what I would call our target market. But from our 34 cases, we've actually saved the organisation $174,956. And that's based on reduces in absenteeism and presenteeism. We've also saved employees $39,814. So if an organisation wanted to report back to their employees how much of a benefit this is to their organisation, they could report that back as well. The economic cost is our actual cost that we've saved the organisation minus the cost of the program. So that's where we get our economic cost. What that leads us to is our three metrics at the bottom. We have our cost benefit ratios. So for every dollar that's been invested, the organisation is getting a 7.6 or 7-to-1 ratio return. And internal rate of return is our cost benefit ratio minus our initial investment. So let's say we take $1 and we end up getting a $7 return. If we minus the original dollar, we end up with $6 in our hand. That's an internal rate of return. This is a metric that most CFOs and CEOs or any finance people are quite familiar with, and it allows them to compare this investment versus other investments that they're making, whether it's in new employees or technology or information, whatever it might be. We have a 661% return on our investment. What that leads us to is a net present value, which is how much we have actually saved the organisation in dollar terms over the last 12 months. And net present value means that these dollars have been taken to present day value. Again, that's another financial metric. Now that we have our report, we can print that off. We print that to PDF and then save that in the relative Q Drive folder. So people often look at, where do I save it? You actually print a PDF and you save it in that fashion. You can then take the report with the exec summary, with the presentation out to the client to talk through the report. What's really great is once you're talking through the report, you can also let them know that you can make it a little bit more tailored and specific for their organisation by entering some more data around relocation costs, retraining costs, disability claims costs, accident costs. However, we know that the biggest savings do come from absenteeism and presenteeism. So even if you have nothing else except those two factors, you're probably getting 90 to 95% of the benefit anyway.